Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Infinite Warfare In Depth. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the insane recoil reduction with the VMC sight, which I am using right here in conjunction with the NV4 Fallout variant because it also has stability and a foregrip, and the weapon is basically a laser, but the VMC sight has one of the most ridiculous recoil reductions that I've ever seen in any Call of Duty game. It is incredibly effective, but tactical because this was done on purpose. So before we get too far into it, let's talk about the three major components of recoil. You have center speed, which is how fast your gun comes back to center, view kick, which is one of the ways it can kick up and shake your view around, and gun kick, which is another way the gun itself kicks and wobbles. Of these, center speed and view kick are the most important, and gun kick is the least important. There are two minor components of recoil. There's first shot and multiplier. Some weapons, their first shot kicks a little more or a little less, and there's kick opposed input. Each weapon has a different ability for you to fight the recoil, and it's a kind of a scalar that lets you pull it back down or control some weapons easier than others. But the VMC sight massively reduces recoil. However, this is only when zoomed in, so you'll need to hit Y or triangle on PlayStation to zoom the sight in, and when you do, it does a major recoil reduction. It will increase the center speed by 25%, and since this is the speed at which your gun comes back to steady, that means it's basically like 25% less recoil, makes it feel great, and it reduces gun kick by 95%, which is absurd. It almost completely removes gun kick from the equation. Gun kick is not as important as view kick, but it still definitely helps. So you've heard me blab about it. Let me show you exactly how it works. This is the KBAR 32 assault rifle, and I'm just testing it out here on Presaint. The first one that I'm going to be shooting is the base KBAR 32. This is just the regular old KBAR, just shooting the wall to kind of get an idea of the recoil and the pattern and how it looks and all that sort of stuff. So this is kind of our baseline. This is what I would call normal assault rifle recoil. It kicks, but it's not too bad. So let's go ahead and use the VMC sight when it's zoomed in, and don't forget that you can zoom it out as needed. And you'll notice right off the bat that it doesn't seem to be kicking nearly as much. Just visually you can tell, much less mathematically, and when I walk much closer you can see the recoil patterns and see that they are much tighter, and that would be a much more dead enemy or a deader faster enemy. Talking a little crazy here, but this is the KBAR 32 with a VMC sight and a foregrip. The foregrip, which we'll talk about in a little bit later, does actually work, and it does stack with this and is incredibly effective. And at this point, you've basically made a laser. The KBAR 32 is now a laser assault rifle, and you can drop people at very long ranges. That was the KBAR. Let's take a look at the FHR-40, which is a submachine gun that has the most recoil of all the SMGs, maybe the most in the entire game. And you can see that the base FHR-40 with no attachments here has an absurd amount of recoil. It's kicking all the way up into the yellow space on this building and kind of topping out my view window, which is just completely out of control. I actually had to step back to show you the whole recoil pattern. So now I'm going to use the exact same weapon, but with the VMC sight zoomed in, and you will see that the recoil is much more under control. Now the gun still does kick a lot, right? But the pattern doesn't really get into the yellow, and it certainly doesn't top out my view. It is much more tame, much more reduced, and easier to control. Now this last one I'm going to show you is something kind of crazy. I have the FHR-40 counterweight, which also has stability, and I'm running the VMC sight, and I'm running foregrip. And you can see, especially on this second pattern, because recoil is a little bit random. I'm not fighting it. I'm not trying to control it. This is just me holding down the trigger and not touching any other buttons. The recoil is incredibly stable, and that makes this a really awesome attachment. Now, do keep in mind you have to be on the zoomed in mode to get the recoil reduction. The zoomed out mode doesn't work. When it's zoomed out, it's just like a normal red dot sight, nothing too fancy about it, but it does give you the option to flip that mode on to get crazy recoil reduction for long-range engagements. The foregrip, which we finally have stats on, reduces view kick by 7%. View kick is more important than gun kick, and that stacks with the VMC and the stability perk, so it works quite well with everything else. Overall, not super powerful on its own, this. And of course, yes, you can stack this with stability or focus or any of the recoil reducing perks on the gun perks on the guns, and it works excellently. It's just a way to make lasers, and it's something that I would recommend doing with almost any setup that you run in this game. It's clearly the superior sight. Now, it's basically a normal red dot sight as is, and it does have a pretty severe penalty of a smaller field of view and a really strong zoom, but when you need that zoom, it's for long-range combat for the most part, so it just makes sense to flop that over and just engage people at long range and laser them to death. Guys, that's all for this short episode of In Depth. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.